A cross flow and mix flow, what it's called is telling you which direction the air is flowing compared to which direction the grain is flowing. Cross flow, tower dryers, portable dryers, profile dryers, whatever you want to call them, they are cross flow. The grain moves one direction, the air moves across the flow of the grain. Grain moves down, air moves across. If it's a tower dryer with vacuum cooling, maybe it's sucking in here at the bottom, but it's still a cross flow grain dryer. Mix flow means the grain, so mix flow means the grain is flowing down, the air is coming out of the heat duct, some is going counter flow, grain moving this way, air moving against it, counter flow. Some is moving with the grain, concurrent flow. It might move across here some, so it's maybe going across the flow and counter flow. So we have a mixture of air flows. That is what cross flow means. See, this company understands. I was at a show and talked to tech guys, sales guys of large manufacturers. And one of those manufacturers has a description that this is their airflow, that it comes out of the duct, goes down, and comes out the ducts below it. This is not true. If we are going to move forward in this industry, first the manufacturers have to understand how their grain dryers work. Because this is not how this manufacturer's grain dryer works. This is a marketing picture that is not telling the truth. This is how the grain dryer works. Heat duct, exhaust duct. This heat duct puts air to all four ducts, meaning mix flow. The grain does not mix as it flows down across these ducts. We will get to that in a minute. But the grain does not mix. Neither does it dry a lot evener. There are reasons for the efficiency in a mix flow. It is not evener drying. Even if it don't have screens, even if it has ducts like this that flow down through what I call a rack style dryer, this is still a cross flow dryer because the grain is moving one way and the air is moving across. This is a counter flow. Air going this way, grain going down. Shivers, that's a counter flow dryer. And then I talk to companies and their salespeople, their service people do not understand the way a mixed flow dryer works. So here we're going to look at it. Let's pull this up here. So we look at some studies that are done. Here they had a few different designs. Most manufacturers use a design like this where they have a full duct, a half duct. They will say about how the exhausting of this duct helps the corn along the end cool better or dry better. When somebody explains to you that this duct is designed a certain way to make their grain not have hot spots on the corner, that just means they do not understand how a grain dryer looks and they've never done any research online on how a mixed flow grain dryer works. Now you see this here, this is a goofy looking thing. We'll get to that. So in studies, they figured out, they put a layer of grain at the top that's equal. What you find is along these end walls, the grain moves slower. It doesn't move a little bit slower. It moves at, look how far this is moved here. The grain along the end wall moves about 1/3 the speed. In the middle, your grain is only going to spend about 1/3 the time in the dryer that your grain at the end is going to if they have a full duct here. There is one manufacturer that figured this out and they made the first duct in a half duct and it corrected this problem. I've been on top of many brands of Mixflow dryers, and the ends of the columns do not move properly. And then they will say their dryer mixes the grain as it goes through. Well, if you look at the studies that are done, the grain that comes across this heat duct and is exposed to the heat here goes down the middle, goes around this heat duct, is exposed to the heat here, goes down, down through. The corn that's in the middle between the ducts goes down through and stays between the ducts. You have the same corn that goes across this heat duct, goes across the next heat duct, goes across the next heat duct, the whole way from top to bottom. The corn that's along the cool duct is along the exhaust duct the whole way down and is the coldest corn. So instead of the inside of the column being hotter than the outside of the column, you have strips of corn in here that the hottest corn, the coolest corn. They've done all sorts of studies on this. This is not a new thing. Most manufacturers do not understand how their grain dryer works. And you say, well, how can a manufacturer build a grain dryer and not understand how it works? I'm telling you, go talk to them. They will tell you how it works, and it will go against all studies that have been done, because they are saying what they were told to say, what they were told by someone else. They are nothing more than an echo chamber and have no idea how the inner workings of their grain dryer work. It actually really irritates me, because manufacturers are giving bad information. They have done very little testing, and somebody makes a grain dryer that sells, so they try to copy it. That is the majority of the grain drying industry. Here, I'm just giving an overview of this study. I'm not going to read it all. I've read it all, but I'm just going to give you an overview. When they did this study, they designed the end walls of it back and forth to make the grain flow funny. By doing that, they got a better grain flow, and they got grain to mix as it goes down through. To make an actual grain dryer like that would be really hard to make a grain dryer of any size in that configuration. But that dryer worked the best of anything they studied. This isn't one study. This is another study. They have the grain heat ducts here, exhaust ducts, and then heat ducts. Same thing in this study. The grain at the end moves at 1/3 the speed. There is grain that is moving at no more than 1/3 the speed at the end wall. So you're going to have fire hazard at the end wall if your grain dryer has full ducts like this next to the end wall. These ducts here need to be half ducts. It does not work correctly otherwise. Now, I'm not going to go through all the details of this here. There's different angles of these ducts. They've done a lot of studies on duct design, how the grain flows best. It's important how those ducts are designed also. So they did round ducts, they did peak ducts, different angles of ducts. And the long and the short of the whole study, the main thing that affects the farmer today is the grain flow at the end of the dryer is barely moving. There's grain in here that barely moves because of the way these ducts are designed next to the end wall. The first duct in from the end wall, there's a manufacturer that made a half duct here. It was actually a fella I know who came up with the idea, whose name is on the patent. He grew up a farm boy, and he sells grain equipment, and he figured out that this needs to be a half duct to come down through. No manufacturer, no engineer has figured out how to make the grain flow properly in a dryer. A dealer grew up a farm boy, figured out how to do it, and one manufacturer did it. The rest of the manufacturers are selling Mixflow grain dryers, and they're telling you stuff like this is their airflow, or the grain mixes as it goes down through these ducts. And it's not so. The grain does not mix. Unless they have their ducts like this, the grain is not mixing. We have a straight flow of grain down through. And this wasn't one study that was done. This is multiple studies that have been done on this. So when you're designing a Mixflow dryer, put some research into it. Don't tell your salespeople the corn mixes. That's bad information. Bad information makes bad decisions. The grain is not mixing. It goes straight down through. Now you say, how is a Mixflow more efficient than a crossflow? I'll make another video for that and explain why a Mixflow is more efficient than a crossflow. But it's not because it's drying evener. That has nothing to do with it. A Mixflow dryer dries at least as uneven as a crossflow grain dryer. Anybody who's done the research knows that. If you go across between two heat ducts and drill a hole, every inch from this duct across, every inch drill a hole and stick a meat thermometer in. Just a 1/4 inch hole. Every inch or inch and a half, whatever you need to fit a meat thermometer distance. Get a small dial meat thermometer and stick meat thermometers in every inch or inch and a half from one duct to the next duct. It'll blow your mind, the temperature variance. The temperature variance is huge. The hottest corn is every bit as hotter than a crossflow dryer. The cool corn, every bit as cool as a crossflow dryer. They do not dry evener. So manufacturers, educate your salespeople. I was at a large farm show the other week and it was a disgrace. The information the salespeople are telling customers as they come up. Telling customers their grain mixes. Telling customers that exhausting a corner duct makes their grain dryer keep the end corn from getting as hot. I don't care how good of exhaust you have on this corner duct. This corn that sits in here for 3 times as long as this corn, it's going to get overheated and overdried. So, grain dryer companies, do a little research, especially before you go to a show. Do a little research. It's all out there. It's easy to find, and it would make it give us some better information in the industry.